Welcome to My Forever Home, the podcast. I'm Frances Cosway and I've helped hundreds of people create forever homes. I can't wait to share the journey with you. So let's start. Hello everyone and welcome to Your Forever Home, the podcast. Today is the final episode of the Kitchen Design Essentials season, and what a season it's been. The feedback has been fabulous. Not in my wildest dreams when I started to think about this season and started to plan it out did I ever think it was going to get to 21 episodes. It's just phenomenal how much information there is about kitchens. And look, let's face it, the kitchen is one of the most important spaces in our home, and it's probably where we spend a significant amount of money on any renovation, is getting the kitchen right, with the amount of cabinetry that's involved, the amount of appliances that are involved. But because it's so integral to our lifestyle, we need to get it right. And it's just been wonderful to hear from so many of you just emailing me privately to say, look, you're getting so much out of it. It makes my heart sing. And today I actually wanted to just go through and talk about the season and what have we covered in the season, and sort of just do a bit of a recap. So if you're wondering whether that episode might not be so relevant for me, this is sort of a short synopsis of what we've done on the season. I really am just so grateful that you've been listening and been getting so much out of it. Some of you have contacted us with the idea of us designing your kitchen for you, which we get such delight from. I think the biggest buzz comes when a client will say, look, this is on our wish list and we don't think it's achievable. This is what we'd love to have. And we push a magic button, we get together, and miraculously, some of those wishful things that are almost thought about as not available or not accessible have been able to be achieved. And that is where I feel we're able to add so much value. What you think is not able to happen, we can wave our magic wand and sometimes it's achievable. Not all the time, but there've been some really big winners over the last few months that we've been able to do that. So I'm going to go through, I know that whenever I talk about the Kitchen Design Essentials season, I talk about the episode number of the actual kitchen design season, but the episode number that comes up on the podcast is actually different. So I am going to cover those off today, so that if you wanted to go back to a particular episode that you feel is pertinent to you, then I will give you the actual episode number so it's easy for you to find, not necessarily the episode number of the Kitchen Design Essentials. So what have we covered? I would be surprised if there hasn't been an area that we haven't covered. We've gone from appliances to outdoor kitchens, to how to budget, to how to actually get your colors together, all the different materials you have. And, we've just gone into, I feel, quite a lot of detail. So where did we start? We started with episode 1 of the Kitchen Design Essentials season, which is episode 24 of the podcast, welcoming the season in, talking about the first season that we've actually run in Your Forever Home, the podcast. And it's certainly not the last. I think the seasons have got things really focused. And so in that particular episode 24 of the podcast, I provided an overview of what's in store. But really, this episode is giving you really good insight into what we've covered, and I think is probably a little bit more in depth about, where we've come along this journey. Episode 27 of the podcast was working out what you need in the kitchen. And that's where I really talked about the kitchen's needs assessment. We call it a deep dive, but it's really analysis. One of my clients has called it an analysis of, your lifestyle and how you cook and what you need to store and where do you need to store it and how many people are going to be cooking at any one time, or being in the kitchen, and how do you entertain. And so in that episode, I really went into a lot of detail about how you can work that out yourself, do a really thorough needs assessment, but also in the beautiful Kitchen Design Made Easy online course, there's actually downloads that will help you and ask all the questions that you'd want to ask yourself in a 6-page document that you can actually then complete that document, and that's the needs assessment already done for you. So you can do it manually by just going through all the questions that I pose in that particular episode at episode 27, or you can actually use the resource that's in the online course. That's a really critical component to starting that whole kitchen journey. And when I'm actually reviewing kitchen plans, either as part of a floor plan sanity check or as a kitchen sanity check, because don't forget there is the kitchen design sanity check, I'm really asking those questions. So where's this going to go, and making sure that it's been covered off. So critical start to the process. In episode 30, I was talking about kitchen layouts and locations in the home. And that is where, and that was also with Fabielli Fontana, who's also part of the White Pebble Interiors team. And we were talking about the different shapes of kitchens. So you've got a U shape, there's the L shape, which is really popular. There's a galley style kitchen. There's a lineal style kitchen that can then become, you've got a dining table as well. And so we really went into quite a lot of detail about the advantages and disadvantages of each of those, but then also the location within the home and the best location to actually bring in as much natural light as possible. Then in episode 32, I had guest along Jeremy Gates from Gaia Constructions, who was such a wealth of knowledge, providing the builder's insight on what goes wrong with kitchens and what people maybe take for granted. And he really focused on setting a budget and making sure you've got that. And a really interesting point that I found quite fascinating from him was he spoke about undercapitalizing is far worse than overcapitalizing. And what he meant by that, when we drilled down into that a little bit more, was undercapitalizing by not utilizing the space in the best way possible. And then further to that, actually ending up designing it themselves. And, you know, there's kitchen designers out there for a reason. There's so many things that they know that you may not necessarily know if you're thinking about designing it yourself. Think you might be saving yourself a bit of money, but in the end you may not. So he gave some amazing tips, and that was a really great episode. We then went to episode 34, which was episode 5 of the Kitchen Design Essential season. And again, I was back with Fabiella from White Pebble Interiors. And that's where we spoke about some of the key mistakes. And what we did there is we reflected on some of the clients that we've been working with on their kitchens and errors that we were able to catch early. Things that when it was finished would not have been ideal, that the client would have said, if only we'd known that up front, and we would have changed our mind. So that we were really just highlighting some of the things that have happened along our journey as interior designers that are not optimal, and how we've been able to pick it up early and change it so that it has been a really encompassing, very well thought out design. Things like your window placement, there was the size and height of the cabinetry, and also structural constraints. Then we went to episode 36, and that's when I had Laura Neville from Cosentino. Cosentino are distributors of natural stone, reconstituted stone and Decton. And that was the bench tops part 1. We had so much to talk about with bench tops that I split it into 2 episodes. And part 1 was really talking about the products that Cosentino have. And that was a really big range of reconstituted stone under the brand Silestone. And then we also spoke about all the amazing properties of Decton, and then also some of the natural stones that were available. And then in episode 38, I actually then talked about the bench top criteria in terms of how do you select the right bench top for you and your needs, and then went into a whole lot of other types of bench tops available: timber, porcelain, recycled glass, stainless steel, paper rock, concrete, laminate, and solid acrylic surface. So just from that list, you know that there's a lot of information about bench tops, and touching on ones that some people weren't even aware were available. Episode 39 of the podcast took us to talk about splashbacks, which, as those who know me well will know, that I am such a big fan of splashbacks. And I actually posted a photo on Instagram of my own kitchen splashback and how it determined the entire material selection for my kitchen. And so I talked about different splashback materials in that podcast, not only tiles, but glass and stone. And then the considerations from a regulation perspective that you need to consider if you're using gas or induction, and the impact that's going to have on the size of your splashback, but also the impact that may actually have on the choice of material for your splashback too. We then went to episode 41, which is when I spoke about cabinetry materials and talked about the advantages and disadvantages of the different types of materials available, what's going to be more at the higher end of the spectrum, what's going to be at the lower end of the spectrum. So I covered off 2-pack, which is very popular, but I talk about some of the disadvantages with 2-pack, thermal wrap, laminate, timber veneer, and Decton. And I also in that episode touched on kickers. So the size of your kicker, the sort of materials that you need to consider, and how it can actually impact the overall design and how you can actually make it a contrast or you make it very similar to the cabinetry material as well. Then we went to episode 43, which was episode 10 of the Kitchen Design Essentials season. And that's where I covered off flat pack versus custom designed kitchens. And I really just wanted to, in that episode, I shared the considerations that you need to think about when you are looking at a flat pack kitchen versus a custom. So some of the design constraints that may be there, some of the material constraints, and also some of the possible layout compromises that may need to occur. Not in all instances, but it really is other things that you need to consider and factor in with a flat pack kitchen that may not initially come to mind. So that's a great one if that is a consideration for you in your own kitchen. Then we went to episode 45 of the podcast season, and that's where I talked about internal elevations and joinery design. Joinery design being cabinetry design, all the cabinetry that you use in your kitchen, which is critical. Now, this also then prompted me off the back of this with a lot of questions that we had from clients. It also prompted me to write a blog about this topic as well and share some internal elevations and what they should really encompass. Now, I've seen some really bad internal elevations in my time. There's no consideration for where the power may be. And I think as interior designers, when we are designing spaces, consideration for where the power points are going to be shouldn't just be left up to whoever's designing the electrical plan, because they might not have the same design insight into why things are the way they are with what you're designing. So good elevation should really be encompassing everything. So I talked about what internal elevations are, because that can sometimes be what are they? A lot of clients ask us what they are, but also why they're so important. Then the other thing I talk about in that episode, which is I really encourage you to listen to this particular episode, is why internal elevations are worth the investment and what can actually go wrong if you don't have them, not only from a cost perspective, but from design perspectives, and how the builder is just going to be basically building blind by not having internal elevations. But having them done properly means, yes, they're going to cost you a bit of money, but that is then versus mistakes and also blowouts that can occur if you don't have them. Design compromises and afterthoughts because it's just not clear. So it's a very, very good episode if you are thinking, well, I don't really need the internal elevations, we'll sort of, wing it as we go when we get to the build stage. Episode 47 is when I talked about key kitchen measurements, and that's so important to make sure that the metrics and the measurements that you've got within your kitchen are realistic, that they're actually spaces are not too big, that they're not too small. So I talk about some of the key things with regards to gaps between the rear bench and the island bench, how big that should be ideally, when is it too big, when is it too small. We talk about ideal island bench lengths, the depths of cupboards, what you need to consider with regards to fridges. So that's a really good one. If you're already part of the Beautiful Kitchen Design Made Easy, you'll have the transcript and you've got that all written out for you. Otherwise, you'll need to listen to that and basically take a lot of notes, but it is a really important one, particularly when you're reviewing plans for your own kitchen. Then in episode 49, episode 13 of the Kitchen Design Essentials season, I talked about butlers, pantries and pantries, and really the misnomer that, you have to have a butler's pantry or a pantry, that there are other things that you can consider, such as appliance cupboards or step-in pantries, pantry drawer systems that are absolutely fantastic. And just what is going to serve you, and working out, again, going back to the very first episode, what your needs assessment is, so you can actually work out what you need rather than just, doing what everyone else is doing. So we talk about other options in that. I do cover that, but I also talk about the difference between a butler's pantry and a traditional walk-in pantry. So also a valuable episode there too. Episode 51 of the podcast, I talk with Trisha Nardi from Reese Bathrooms. She actually comes from the Brighton store in Melbourne, and her and I talked about kitchen taps and sinks. We talked about the different types of sinks available, the different taps available, what you need to consider, buying considerations, what makes a good tap, why you should invest, what makes a really cost-effective tap, and some of the issues that may pose for you. And we also talk about the billy and the zip taps and what you need to consider from a design perspective if you are incorporating a billy or a zip tap into your kitchen. Really interestingly, I had a client who we're already working with, we're designing her kitchen, and she said, I listened to that episode and I decided against a billy tap, all based on that episode. She said, are you proud of me? I said, as long as you're making the right decision. But she said it was just such good advice. So if you are thinking about a billy or a zip tap, don't miss that episode 51. Trisha and I also talk about the very controversial black tap and black sink. Can it be used in a kitchen? When can you use black and when it not to? And then also what to look out for with a really good quality sink, the thickness of the stainless steel, and again with the tap systems. Then in episode 53, I had Rob Sinclair, Managing Director from E&S Trading, which is a massive appliance store in Victoria, who will, I think, soon to be nationwide. But Rob was a wealth of knowledge, and it was so beautiful to speak to someone that was so incredibly passionate. He just knew his stuff inside out. And what was going to end up being one episode of the podcast, I had to split into two because it was just so long. But boy, did we cover some ground. And with Rob's knowledge, that is such an important episode to listen to if you're thinking about your fridge, dishwasher, oven, or steam ovens, because he talks about all the differences, the really good brands to look out for. So very, very informative. But the other thing that was just music to my ears when talking to Rob was, it was so refreshing to hear him talking around, you need to work out what you need. What sort of cook are you? What's important for you as you cook? What are the sorts of things that you need when you're cooking, and how that really needs to drive your buying decision. And I thought that was, well, it just spoke to me so personally, because that's always my mantra with everything, and everything I ever advise my clients is always around, think about what you need. And I suppose it goes back right to the start when you're working out your needs assessment for your kitchen, that, your needs assessment for the type of cook you are is going to drive the appliances that you need. And interestingly, again, I was talking to clients of mine who, she wanted a double oven and then a single 900 as well, and had been a really, really big cook in her time. And then she said to me, you know what, I'm crazy here. I don't cook as much as what I used to. And why am I creating a kitchen that's got 3 ovens when, space is a premium, and I really need to think about what I'm doing now. And she was a retired lady who just wasn't cooking like she used to, had been a massive cook in her time, and realised her needs of 20 years ago were different now. So it was beautiful hearing Rob talk about that too. It really spoke to me personally. So we, in that episode, also talk about, the integrated fridges, semi-integrated dishwashers, freestanding options for your ovens and so forth, and wall ovens, and different sizing. So that was a really, really awesome episode with regards to your buying decisions around appliances. Then in the next episode, which was episode 54, which was appliances part 2, Rob and I picked up again and we started talking about stovetops and range hoods. And he and I were 100% aligned on what we felt, what we do feel is the best range hood out there and why it's worth spending the extra money. And then he also talked about some other appliances like built-in coffee machines, and then, talked about some of the latest things coming out. And one of the amazing things that he was talking about was a product coming out of the Netherlands, which is built-in gas burners built into your bench top. So it's completely flush. They were awesome. Just sort of spotted around the bench top. So he talks about some of the new things coming out too. Episode 55 was where I was back on my own again, and I started talking about handles and hardware and how handles can really affect the look of your kitchen, and how they are such an important consideration when you are working within maybe an industrial style kitchen or a heritage home, and how they can just change the look of very, very simple cabinetry and just make your kitchen, really, really stand out. So I also talked about the advantages and disadvantages of handles and knobs and what you need to look out for when you're choosing those, and then the different shapes and sizes and materials available in terms of the different types of metal finishes, living metals, timber, and also leather. And then I also touched on some of the internal hardware that you need to think about with regards to internals of your drawers, the runner systems that we generally recommend and use, and other proprietary systems that can help with, the internals of your drawers and your cupboards. Then we got to episode 57, which was, I know a couple of clients or a couple of people had contacted me about, I want to know how to actually bring all the colours together. So this was a well anticipated episode where I talk about how to choose your kitchen colours. And there I really talked about starting with the floor and building up like I would with any scheme in a home, not just a kitchen. And I also walked through the leading material, and if you do have a leading material in your kitchen, how that drives then all the other decisions. So I talked about how you can create that for yourself, and then making sure that there is continuity and flow with the rest of the house by using the same tones, whether they're cool or warm colours. So if you love pulling all of that together, that will be a really important episode for you too. Episode 59 was all around kitchen lighting, which for those of you who know me well will also know that that's a very important topic for me. And I really ran through, the different types of lighting available, be it task, ambient and decorative lighting, and how you can incorporate all three into your kitchen. I do talk about why downlights are not my favourite light source, particularly in a kitchen, and why you shouldn't rely on them solely to light up your kitchen in combination with other light sources. That's fine, but I was, in that episode, I talk about using combinations of light sources so that you can dial it up and dial it down, create ambient lighting in that whole open plan living area, as well as creating really good task lighting. There's nothing worse than having an area like a kitchen that is really badly lit. Then we got to episode 61, which was episode 20 of Kitchen Design Essentials season, and that's where I talked about budgeting. What an important topic. I outlined the ways to create your budget, so what actually goes into your budget. And again, in the beautiful Kitchen Design Made Easy online course, there is actually a budget template that you can use. It's effectively a plug and play, and then all the things that you need to think about are listed in there, as well as having the transcript that you're then able to utilize and basically make your own notes, and that's inside the online course. With the budget, I also discuss setting expectations around what you can achieve in different price points. So in there, I have different brackets of pricing. So what you're going to get for something around 5,000, what you're going to get for around 20,000, 40,000, and then upwards of 80,000. How does that change what's delivered in your kitchen? And then I also do mention, and I'll mention it here again, to remember what Jeremy talked about in his episode, in episode 4 of the season, that undercapitalizing can actually be worse than overcapitalizing, because you want to make sure that the space is absolutely used to its optimum. The final episode of the season was episode 62. So that was episode 21 of the Kitchen Design Essentials season. And that's where I talk about outdoor kitchens. They're becoming such an important contributor to our lifestyles, particularly in Australia. And so I talk about the different material types that are applicable to outdoor kitchens because they are different to internal kitchens, but also working out the location of your outdoor kitchen and how that may actually impact the interior kitchen material selections. And I talk about that in more detail there as to why that's the case. And then where are you going to have it, whether it's going to be separate to the house or, added on as an extension to the home and just becomes one big indoor-outdoor kitchen area. Whew, that was a lot of stuff about kitchens, I tell you what. So go back and, grab any of the episodes that you may have missed. I've made it clear now as to which episodes in the actual podcast series are applicable to which season, which episode of the Kitchen Design Essentials season. It would be amiss of me to not let you know that in the beautiful Kitchen Design Made Easy online course, you've got all the transcripts. You've got a really easy area where you can see all the podcasts together, plus all the show notes, plus all the transcripts from all the podcasts relevant to the Kitchen Design Essentials season. Plus there are professionally designed downloadable resources like I was talking about, the 6-page the needs assessment, so the clear clarity design worksheet. There's also the budget template. You've got short lists for your material selections, your final material selection, so you can just hand it over to the builder. And then there's a 12-point checklist so that you can basically go through and tick it as you've done each point so that you keep yourself on track. So there's quite a lot of resources in there and it's only $99. So not only will you get the 21 lessons, you get the 21 podcasts, you get the 21 transcripts, plus you'll get the downloadable resources. So if you're thinking about doing your kitchen, it's a great resource for only $99. That's available at whitepebblinteriors.com.au/courses. Now, one of the most beautiful things you could do for me is, if you've really enjoyed this season, is please leave me a review on whatever podcast network that you use. It really helps other people find the Your Forever Home podcast. And I'd be so incredibly grateful because it just helps get it out there to as many people as possible. And, having these beautiful reviews, it's such a warming thing. And it really is encouraging for me then to create more things that you're able to access. Now, I'd love to put it out there as well. We're thinking about what the next season is going to be. And I'd love to hear from you in terms of, what would you like to have as the next season? Kitchens is obviously a really big season. There's so many things to cover off in a kitchen. But perhaps there's something else that you'd like me to cover off in a season or even in one episode of the podcast, which is how everything started. There'll be a couple of single podcast episodes now, and then we'll start the new season. But if there is something that you'd like me to cover, please drop me a line. I'm completely accessible. You can grab me at Frances at whitepebblinteriors.com.au or then at info@whitepebblinteriors.com.au. And the final thing I wanted to leave you with, this is hot off the press, is on Thursday, the 26th of November, which is in a couple of weeks from date of recording. There is the top 5 tips for designing your forever home. So if you're thinking of creating a new home next year or renovating in 2021, then this is going to be a fabulous podcast. A fabulous webinar. You can rock up with your cocktail, with your pot of tea or glass of wine. No one gets to see you, so you can be in your gym jams. I won't be, obviously. But I am going to go through 5 key things to remember. And those 5 key things are driven by what I see on a floor plan sanity check time and time again. I'm doing, at least 1 to 2 floor plan sanity checks a week. And it's the thing that just comes up all the time. So I want to be able to share with you what are the top 5 things that I see time and time again that you can then mitigate in your plans when you're doing your forever home. So join me 7 o'clock Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time on the 26th, and that's already live on the website. It's for you to register, and it's all free. So I look forward to having you join me on the 26th of November. Please get in touch about what season is going. You'd love to have me do a season on for the podcast. Thank you so much for listening over the last 21 weeks. It has been just a fabulous journey, and I've just been so motivated to keep going because of all the really beautiful feedback that I've been receiving. So thank you so much. And I will be sure to be here next week. Don't forget about the Your Forever Home Live, which is on Instagram and Facebook Live, where at 12:30 every Tuesday I'm there to answer your questions. And more often than not, there's just something that's come up during the week that I share at the same time. So I certainly hope to be in touch very soon. Again, thank you so much. And it's been wonderful having you on the show. Thank you. Bye for now. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of My Forever Home. If you're ready to renovate or build a new home and you need help to create a beautiful and functional forever home, you can book a chat with me directly at whitepebbleinteriors.com.au/chat. Have a great day.